Hello and welcome to this educational video series. Children are the future of our country. So it is very important for us to take care of their health and well-being. So we have to take care of their health, that is the physical health as well as the mental health. Right from birth, the child can face various challenges. One among these is the occurrence of specific mental health disorders called as neurodevelopmental disorders. In this series, we are going to address various concepts related to neurodevelopment, neurodevelopmental disorders, and focus on specific neurodevelopmental disorders. In the first episode, we'll try to understand some fundamental concepts related to neurodevelopment, neurodevelopment disorders, their classification, and what are the special needs of people with neurodevelopmental disorders. Come, let us meet our expert.
Neurodevelopment is a term that is used to describe the development of the brain. And when we talk about development of the brain, we're looking at development of different abilities and different functions of the brain. As you know, our brains do help us do a lot of things in our day-to-day lives. Right? We think, we move, we feel, we behave socially in different situations, and all of these functions, all of these abilities actually emerge from the brain. Right? So the development and growth in all of these abilities is what neurodevelopment is about. When does neurodevelopmental start? Well, it starts very early, right from the time a child is in the mother's womb. When the brain starts to form and the rest of the nervous system starts to form. So it begins there and goes on, after the birth of the child, throughout childhood, adolescence, and then even into early adulthood. Scientific literature has now told us that probably, between the ages of 20 and 30 is when the brain development actually starts to stabilize, or when the brain development is actually complete. So what happens over the developmental lifespan is that we grow in our abilities to, first of all, physically move around. So a young child learns how to turn over, sit up, walk, run up, climb stairs, etc. And then, as they grow older, it becomes more and more about development of thinking abilities, social abilities, and their emotional abilities. And these abilities continue to mature right into early adulthood. Neurodevelopmental disorders is an umbrella term that actually includes different types of disorders that are generally diagnosed and are generally identified during childhood. Right? So because they are identified during the developmental, when peak developmental changes are happening in children, they are called neurodevelopmental disorders. And as the term implies, they are to do with problems with development. And what can the problems of development be like? There could be problems with physical development. So, there may be delays in acquiring abilities to sit, walk, run, climb, physical abilities. So, there may be a delay in that. Similarly, there can also be delays and difficulties with other aspects of development, like trouble with learning, so thinking abilities, and all the other mental abilities of a child may be affected. Social abilities may be affected, so children may find it difficult to, or may not be able to initiate conversation, communicate socially. They may also have difficulties with use of language, which again is a developmental ability that they develop. And there can also be difficulties with emotional abilities, the abilities to recognize emotions, to understand what to do when you feel a certain emotion, and how to regulate your emotions. Right? So neurodevelopmental disorders include many different categories of disorders, all of which in one or the other form have a combination of different developmental problems. Right? So there can be combination of motor developmental problems with thinking, social and emotional difficulties, or there may be one or two of these abilities that get affected. Common neurodevelopmental disorders that we tend to come across and that are diagnosed in children frequently are such as intellectual developmental disorder, autism spectrum disorder, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and then there can be specific developmental disorders such as specific learning disorder or disorders of speech and language. Right? So there are many different types, and each of these may have different combinations of developmental problems. That's a wonderful question. Special needs is something that every single person has, right? So because all of us have our strengths, as we have our difficulties and limitations, that may make certain things difficult for us to do. Right? Not everything in the world is easy for every single person to do. So on the one hand, everyone has one or the other special needs. But I guess when we are looking at it specifically from a point of view of mental health problems and mental health difficulties, then largely the term is used when people have developmental problems, like we spoke about neurodevelopmental disorders. So generally it is used in that context. So if there are difficulties with either motor, social, cognitive or emotional development, then their entire spectrum of things is sometimes referred to as people with special needs. Yes, what happens is that when a child has developmental difficulties, so when any part of the brain's development is not happening as it should for a particular age, we say that the child has developmental needs or special needs, as is commonly called. If these developmental needs and difficulties are impairing the day-to-day functioning of a child in a significant way, to the extent that it is difficult for them to carry out their tasks at home, it is difficult for them to attend school, difficult for them to interact with peers or with other people in society. So if there is a substantial impairment from these developmental difficulties, then the idea of disability comes up. Right? So a person is in one or the other ways not able to or disabled to perform in a particular environment, in a particular context. Right? So special needs can refer to any kind of developmental difficulties, and if these interfere significantly, substantially with day-to-day functioning, then the concept of disability. Special needs, which again most of the time refers to there being developmental problems in a child, can pose challenges or difficulties in a lot of different contexts for children. For example, at home, their basic self-care activities or like eating, dressing, bathing, they may not be able to perform as would be expected for their age because the brain is not developed enough to carry out these functions independently. Similarly, the challenges can happen at school, where a child's ability to participate in learning, to learn from what is being taught, to learn from their environment, to interact with other children present in the class, all of this can be limited because of the fact that the child is not developed enough to be able to engage with these environments. And as a child grows older, these developmental problems or special needs can pose difficulties with higher learning, with selecting what they want to do later on in life, and so on. Right? So it can have difficulties during childhood and even throughout the lifespan because the brain is not developed as would be expected for a given age and stage of a child.
This concludes the first episode in our series on neurodevelopmental disorders. In this episode, we got some fundamental information about neurodevelopmental disorders, what are special needs, what is the concept of disability, and what are the challenges faced by children with special needs. We will be back with our next episode. Namaste.